You see that? That's when I realized I'm ready to start my own place.
Yeah, I'm really excited. All right, that sounds great.
So I'm making plans for right now. Like going back to my roots and opening my own restaurant. Start your plan today with a Northwestern Mutual financial advisor and spend your life living.
see my vital sign, draw my battle lines, going to war again. Feeling the rhythm inside of my chest, all I need is just a pen. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write our story. I believe we can be an army. We are the warriors who learn to love the pain. We come from different places, but have the same name. Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. We are the broken ones who chose to spark a flame. Watch as our fire rages, our hearts are never tame. Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. I've struggled for years and through all of the tears I faced, the doubts I hide. I'll never give in to my fears, people think cause I heard my voice inside. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I will never lose my voice if I cut out all the noise. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write a story. I believe we can be an army. We are the warriors who learn to love the pain. We come from different places, but have the same name. Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. We are the broken ones who chose to spark a flame. Watch as our fire rages, our hearts are never tame. Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. Was it alright for someone like me to know you're not alone? The moves that you make, yeah, that come up mistakes, don't ever lose your hope. Just know that you were born for this. Just know you were born for this. We are the warriors who learn to love the pain. We come from different places, but have the same name. Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. We are the broken ones who chose to spark the flame. Watch as our fire rages, our hearts are never tame. Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. We were born for this. We were born for this.
Yeah.
Weezy,
Back home smoking legal. I got more slaps than a Beatle.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Venema Aquatic Center on the campus of Calvin University for the 2023 rivalry dual meet between Calvin University and Hope College. Before we begin this event this evening, we would like to pause and honor those who have fought and continue to fight for the freedoms that we enjoy here in the United States of America. Please direct your attention to the flag in the southeast corner of the pool, and gentlemen, remove your caps as we proudly honor America at the playing of our national anthem. The first event of the evening is event number 1, the women's 200-yard medley relay. There is one relay. Mr. Referee. Swimming in lane 1, the Calvin E relay of Martinson, Vroon, Diluski, and Pierce. Lane 2, the Calvin C relay of McNierney, Korfmacher, Mers, and Skolma. Lane 3, the Hope B relay of Wesolik, Ryle, O'Donnell, and Monroe. Lane 4 is the Calvin A relay of Seitzma, Thier, Farrell, and Sunday. Lane 5, the Hope A relay of Gidley, Kraus, Kirkman, and Turner. Lane 6, the Calvin B relay of Norman, Radowski, Fisher, and Benjelink. Lane 8 is the Calvin D relay of Robertson, Iverson, Hoover, and Hansel. Hope with the lead in the backstroke there at 27.22 in lane 5. Calvin behind them by 0.4 in lane 4 at 27.66. .56.69 at the halfway mark for Hope in lane 5. 58.15 in lane 4 for Calvin. Hope with 9/10 of a second lead going into the 50 freestyle. 25.88 out of Hope's Butterfly, 25.30 out of Calvin. 122.5 and 123.4. Sydney Sunday closing the gap. Not sure if it's enough. Hope manages to take the touch there at 146.67. Sunday anchoring in at 23.42 there in lane 4 for Calvin at 146.87. 0.2 of a second separating the women's 200 medley relay to start off the evening's competition. Great swimming, ladies. Up next is event number 2. This is the men's 200-yard medley relay. There are 2 heats. This is heat 1. Calvin only heat here in lane 3. Calvin G relay of Taylor, Tudor, Karankowitz, and Kaisner. Lane 4, Calvin's E relay of Ziegler, Foal, Skotanis, and Logan. Lane 5, Calvin's F relay of Schmid, Jackson, Gelderloos, and Viss. E-relay touching in at 141.46 there in lane 4 for Calvin. That E-relay consisting of Ziegler, Foal, Skotanis, and Logan. Up next is the second and final heat for the men's 200-yard medley relay. Lane 2, the Calvin C relay of Toomey, Crudelli, Cami, and Platt. Lane 3, the Hope B relay of Albrecht, Legrand, Lockett, and Ewell. Lane 4, the Calvin A relay of Holsteg, Gemmen, Peterson, and Mullen. Lane 5, the Hope A relay of Fisher, Dunatis, Catton, and Cummins. Lane 6, the Calvin B relay of Hayes, Miner, Campbell, and Bajwa. Lane 7, the Hope C relay of Klein, Langdon, Nishaw, and Asink. Lane 8, the Calvin D relay of Tershak, Crampy, Meyer, and Kulaga. Calvin Butterflyer in the water there at 48.92. Calvin's B relay in at 50.98. Calvin's A relay at 51.51 at the 100-yard mark. 100 yards down, 100 yards to go. Anchors on the block. Calvin inside the flags there in lane 4. Touching in with a finishing time of 1:31.44, 20.80 split. Calvin's B relay touching second there at 1:34.10. Hope's A relay touching for third at 1:34.76 in lane 5. Calvin's C relay touching for fourth at 1:36.40 in lane 2. That's going to do it for our 200-yard medley relays. Up next is event number 3, the women's 1,000-yard freestyle. There is one heat. Swimming in lane 2 for Calvin is Kaylee Turner. Lane 3 for Hope is Paige Kuhn. Lane 4 for Calvin is Megan Pankratz. Lane 5 for Hope, Nora Martin. Lane 6 for Calvin, Becca Streelman. Lane 7 for Hope is Jessica Estabrook. And lane 8 for Calvin, Linda Steen. A little over a third of the way into the race here. Nora Martin for Hope College leads in lane 5, splitting 32.9 on her last 50. 350.24 at the 350-yard mark, I think. Halfway through the race, 5:30.02 there for Nora Martin in lane 5 of Hope. 33.26 on her last split. Nora Martin for Hope College coming into her 3/4 of the way flip there. 30 laps down, 10 to go. 8:17.35, splitting 33 mid. Estabrook passing up Pankratz there at the turn. 33.90 to 35.22. 8:31 and 8:33. 250 yards left for them in the race. Martin still holding 33 mids in lane 5 for Hope. A thank you to our live streamers for joining us virtually on YouTube. Appreciate having you guys here with us virtually. Hope you're able to stay in touch with the activities going on in the meet today. Nora Martin still in control of the race. It's hers until the finish line now. The bell rings for Nora Martin. She's been in the lead since the first 200, and she's on her last lap at 10:30.73 in lane 5 for Hope College. Nora Martin touches with a finishing time of 11:03.67 in lane 5. Bringing it home there on a 32.9 for her final split. Estabrook touches in at 11:20.74 in lane 7. And Paige Kuhn touches for third at 11:26.98, giving the Hope the 1-2-3 win in the women's 1,000-yard freestyle. Megan Pankratz for Calvin touching in at 11:27.39. Linda Steen in at 11:36.53 in lane 8. Streelman and Turner touching at 11:52 apiece. Up next is event number 4. This is the men's 1,000-yard freestyle. There is one heat. Dane Hubers in lane 2 for Calvin University. Joey Grassman in lane 3 for Hope College. Josh Seidelman in lane 4 for Calvin. Lane 5 belongs to Hope College's Connor Hallberg. Lane 6, Sam Hoover for Calvin University. Lane 7, Calvin University's Henry Fippen. And lane 8 for Calvin is Nathan Kasner. 300 yards into the race, Connor Hallberg of Hope College leading in lane 5. Josh Seidelman of Calvin University next to him in lane 4. Hallberg over a third of the way through the race at 3:22.93, splitting 29.9. Seidelman splitting 30.46. Grassman 30.96. Hoover next to Grassman across the lanes there between 3 and 6. 3:29 for Grassman, 3:30 for Hoover. Connor Hallberg coming into his halfway mark at 4:52.26, 500 yards down, 500 yards to go. Josh Seidelman under the 5-minute mark there at 4:58.38 in lane 4 for Calvin. Grassman and Hoover. Hoover passing Grassman there, 5:03.91 to 5:04.06. Hoover out splitting by about a second in lane 6 to Grassman in lane 3. .30 laps down in lane 5, Connor Hallberg. That must mean my 500-yard mark numbers were off by a 50, which is fine. The standings still remain. That is the 30th lap there for Hallberg. He's still in the lead in lane 5 for Hope. All is well. 29.9, another one for him in lane 5. Seidelman second right now in lane 4 for Calvin. Hoover passing up Grassman a few 50s ago in lane 6. giving us our top 4 in the men's 1,000-yard freestyle. Seidelman splitting 31-3, Hoover splitting 31-7. Hallberg with plenty of room behind him. 820.71, splitting 29.65 there in lane 5. Grassman splitting 33 there. Seidelman 31.5. Phippen at 33.0 there in lane 7. Hoover at 31.9. Hallberg starting to see the finish line, chipping off a few tenths of a second here and there. 29.4 for him in lane 5. Feeling good. Connor Hallberg in the lead there with the flip. Another tenth of a second off his split at 29.32, 9:19.5. And Hallberg inside the finish line, touching in at 9:48.20 in lane 5. Seidelman touching in at 10:06.31 in lane 4. Hoover with a nice strong back 500, touching in for third there at 10:17.30. Dane Hubers taking fourth there in lane 2 on the outside at 10:24.45. Grassman touching in at 10:36.19 in lane 3 for fifth. Henry Phippen in lane 7 at 10:44.39, taking sixth. Nathan Kasner touching in at 11:01.73 in lane 8. That's it for our men and women's 1,000-yard freestyles. Up next is event number 5, the women's 200-yard freestyle. There are 2 heats in event number 5. This is heat 1. In lane 3 for Hope College, Grace Wesley. Lane 4 for Calvin University, Kaylin Ogg. Lane 5 for Hope College, Maggie Horner. Lane 6 for Calvin University, Tori Beagle. Lane 7 for Hope, Lauren Ryle. Maggie Horner, 204.71, taking heat 1 for Hope College in lane 5. 33.42 on her last 50. Kaylin Ogg touching at 209.47, and Tori Beagle at 207.39. Grace Wesley for Hope at 215.79 in lane 3. Lauren Ryle in lane 7 at 229.14, swimming breaststroke. Up next is heat 2 for the women's 200-yard freestyle. Lane 1 for Hope College, Katie Whedon. Lane 2 for Calvin University, Kara Bolger. Lane 3 for Hope College, Ashley Swinwood. Lane 4 for Calvin University is Maggie Farrell. Lane 5 for Hope is Greta Gidley. Lane 6 for Calvin is Kristen Winkle. Lane 7 for Hope, Maddie O'Donnell. Lane 8 for Calvin, Maddie McNearney. At the halfway mark, 56-1s apiece in lanes 3 and 5. 56-7 there for Farrell in lane 4. Gidley and Swinwood leading in lanes 5 and 3, 125.3 and 125.4. Farrell at 127.1, Winkle at 130.8, O'Donnell at 130.6. And Swinwood touches in at 154.35 in lane 3 for Hope College, and Gidley touching in at 154.37 in lane 5 for Hope College. Maggie Farrell in at 157.37 in lane 4 for Calvin. Winkle in at 201.67 in lane 6 for Calvin, and lane 2, Kara Bolger for 5th at 202.57. That's going to do it for event number 5. Up next is event number 6, the men's 200-yard freestyle. There are 2 heats. Lane 3 for Hope College, Brant Asink. Lane 4 for Calvin, Jaden Brookins. Lane 5 for Hope, CJ Gillen-Gurton. Lane 6 for Calvin, Ethan Wayne. Lane 7 for Hope, Bishop Carl. Please refrain from flash photography, please. Thank you. And a finishing touch of 1/10 of a second between Gillen Gurton of Hope and Brookins of Calvin. Gillen Gurton taking the touch at 1:52.42. Brookins at 1:52.54. Great race, gentlemen. Up next is Heat 2 for the men's 200-yard freestyle. Lane 1 for Hope is Jackson Ewell. Lane 2 for Calvin is Jack Kulaga. Lane 3 for Hope is Kenny Pontius. Lane 4 for Calvin, Jake Harris. Lane 5 for Hope, Bailey Smith. Lane 6 for Calvin, Hudson DeBoer. Lane 7 for Hope, Riley LeGrand. Lane 8 for Calvin, Charles Platt. Harris in the lead in lane 4, 49.8. Charles Platt at 51.6 on the outside lane from the large freshman boy. Jake Harris extended his lead there on the last 50, comfortably in front. Hudson DeBoer creeping up there on Bailey Smith in lane 5. We'll see if Smith can take out DeBoer and Platt on the last 50. Smith fighting two knights here in lane 6 and 8. A tall order. Jake Harris coming into his finish. The 140 number just ticked by. And Calvin takes first place for Jake Harris. Hudson DeBoer takes second over Bailey Smith, who got third. And Charlie Platt at 145.96 takes fourth.
There we go.
That's 4 men at the 145 marker faster in the dual meet, gentlemen. Way to go. Up next is event number 7. This is the women's 50-yard freestyle, the splash and dash, the turn and burn. Heat 1. Swinging lane 1 for Calvin is Elizabeth Daluski. Lane 2 for Calvin is Sophia Korfmacher. Lane 3 for Hope is Jocelyn Hobbs. Lane 4 for Calvin is Katie Hansel. Lane 5 for Hope is Ashley Geddes. Lane 6 for Calvin is Lauren Robertson. Lane 7 for Calvin is Rachel Hytonic. Lane 8 for Calvin, Maya Bedford. Coming into the finish, it's going to be Ashley Geddes in lane 5 at 25.42. Katie Hansel touching in second there at 26.79 in lane 4. Jocelyn Hobbs of Hope at 26.99 in lane 3 for third. Up next is Heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope College, Madeline Tesson. Lane 2 for Calvin is Katie Skoma. Lane 3 for Hope is Bella Turner. Lane 4 for Calvin is Sydney Sunday. Lane 5 for Hope is Laurel Wasiak. Lane 6 for Calvin is Hannah Brown. Lane 7 for Hope is Maggie Monroe. And lane 8 for Calvin, Jenna Pierce. Already off the wall coming home. It looks like Sydney Sunday might have a fingernail lead, but it's pretty close. Laurel Wasiak off that last wall coming home. Wasiak's going to take it. She does at 24.10 in lane 5 for Hope. Sydney Sunday touching in at 24.19 in lane 4. Madeline Tesson in the outside lane in lane 1, taking third at 24.88. Up next is event number 8, the men's 50-yard freestyle. There are 3 heats. This is heat 1. Lane 3 for Calvin, Jordan Tudor. Lane 4 for Calvin, Jake Skotanis. Lane 5 for Calvin is Will Gelderlos. Lane 6 for Calvin is Jonathan Taylor. Lane 7 for Calvin, Tater Ring. Skotanis takes it in lane 4 for Calvin in the first heat at 23:09. Up next is heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope is Colin Klein. Lane 2 for Calvin Levi Van Ness. Lane 3 for Hope is Justin Nishaw. Lane 4 for Calvin is Luke Foll. Lane 5 for Hope is Kellen Townsend. Lane 6 for Calvin is Will Toomey. Lane 7 for Hope is Sam Albrecht. Lane 8 for Calvin, Ben Fippen. And Will Toomey is going to take it with 22:34 in lane 6. Taking second there was Levi Van Nast at 22:66 in lane 2 for Calvin. Up next is our third and final heat for the men's 50-yard freestyle. Swimming lane 1 for Hope is Benjamin Dubé. Lane 2 for Calvin is David Boswell. Lane 3 for Hope is Braden Field. Lane 4 for Calvin is Noah Holsig. Lane 5 for Hope is Alex Borsman. Lane 6 for Calvin is Forrest Peterson. Lane 7 for Hope is JT Nissen. And lane 8 for Calvin is Josiah Biss. And Noah Holstag touches in with a 20.32. Forrest Peterson with another 20 point at 20.84 in lane 6. JT Nissen touching there at 22:01 for third in lane 7 for Hope. Up next is event number 9. This is the women's 200-yard IM. There is one heat. Lane 1 for Hope is Macy Mayer. Lane 2 for Calvin, Elise Radowski. Lane 4 for Calvin, Isabella Gable. Lane 5 for Hope, Sarah Kraus. Lane 6 for Calvin, Haley Thier. Lane 7 for Hope is Maddie Remenschneider. Lane 8 for Calvin, Abigail Merles. Into the freestyle, Sarah Kraus leads at 1:36.45 in lane 5 for Hope. And Sarah Kraus touches for Hope College in lane 5 at 2:07.39, bringing it home in a 30.94. Haley Thier touching in at 2:12.34. Isabella Gable, 2:13.32 in lane 4. Radowski for fourth there in lane 2 at 2:16.11. Up next is event number 10. This is the men's 200-yard IM. I forgot to mention there are 2 heats for the men's 200-yard IM. In Heat 1, Lane 1 is Calvin's Drew Schmid. Lane 2 for Calvin, Josh Crampy. Lane 3 for Hope, Christian Dunatis. Lane 4 for Calvin, Caleb Tershak. Lane 5 for Hope, Jack Muller. Lane 6 for Calvin, Jacob Ziegler. Lane 7 for Calvin, Alex Jackson. Caleb Tershak wins Heat 1 there with a 1:59.98, getting under the 2-minute mark, bringing it home at a 27:44 in lane 4. Well done, Caleb. Up next is Heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope, Jake Peterson. Lane 2 for Calvin, Anthony Crudelli. Lane 3 for Hope, Dallas Fisher. Lane 4 for Calvin, Tim Hayes. Lane 5 for Hope is Connor East. Lane 6 for Calvin, Austin Martinson. Lane 7 for Hope, Colin Kalkman. Lane 8 for Calvin, Caleb Gemin. Tim Hayes in the lead at the 100-yard mark there at 53.42. Dallas Fisher at 54.17 next to him in lane 3. Connor East at 56.23. Austin Martinson, 55.71. Kalkman at 56.17. He's flexing his backstroke muscles in lane 7. Gemin, 58.36. Flying back in the books, breaststroke and freestyle left to swim. Tim Hayes stretching long here, coming into his freestyle touch here. 1:27.28, 33.86 on his breaststroke split. Not bad. Tim Hayes coming home inside the 15-meter mark. About a half a body length lead over that Dallas Fisher in lane 3. taking the touch time at 155.09 to 155.56. Dallas Fisher. Connor East for third at 158.5. Martinson at 2:00.66, out-touching Kalkman there in lane 7 at 5th place with 2:00.77. Gemin in at 2:02.90. There's a 10-minute break now before the beginning of event number 13 that will start at 6:02. 5-minute warning. The competition pool will clear at 6 o'clock. Let's begin to clear the competition pool. Let's clear the competition pool. Let's clear the competition pool. Let's clear the competition pool. All right, we resume our swimming competition with event number 13. This is the women's 100-yard butterfly. There is one heat. Lane 1 for Hope is Aubrey East. Lane 2 for Calvin, Allie Hoover. Lane 3 for Hope, Alyssa Kirkman. Lane 4 for Calvin, Maggie Farrell. Lane 5 for Hope, Greta Gidley. Lane 6 for Calvin, Natalie Fisher. Lane 7 for Hope, Maddie O'Donnell. Lane 8 for Calvin, Elizabeth Dialuski. Farrell in the lead at the 50-yard mark at 26.69. Maggie Farrell takes the win at 56.66 in lane 4 for Calvin. Greta Gidley touching in at 57.50 in lane 5. Alyssa Kirkman at 59.82 in lane 3. Up next is event number 14, the men's 100-yard butterfly. There are 3 heats. Heat 1 is a 2-man duel in lanes 4 and 5. Two-man shootout between Calvin's Ethan Wayne and Hope's Colin Klein. A 1v1 trial by combat. Ethan Wayne at 26.68, Colin Klein at 27.20. Ethan Wayne touches in with a 56.36 to win the shootout. Up next is Heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope is Sam Albrecht. Lane 2 for Calvin is Jake Skotanis. Lane 3 is Hope's Justin Neshaw. Lane 4 is Calvin's Ryan Meyer. Lane 5 is Hope's Braden Field. Lane 6 is Calvin's Will Gelderloos. Lane 7, Hope's Kyle Langdon. And lane 8, Kronk. Ryan Meyer touching in with a 54.25 in lane 4. Justin Neshaw taking second there at 54.98. Third place to Kyle Langdon of Hope in lane 7. Up next, our third and final heat for the men's 100-yard butterfly. Lane 1, Hope's JT Nissen. Lane 2, Calvin's Monsieur Julien Camille. Lane 3, Hope's Cooper Osgood. Lane 4, Calvin's Corey Campbell. Lane 5, Hope's Colin Kalkman. Lane 6, Calvin's Forrest Peterson. Lane 7, Hope's Joel Cummins. Lane 8, Calvin's Levi Vanast. Forrest Peterson touching in at 50.27. Corey Campbell in at 50.46. Julian Cammy at 50.94. Calvin going 1, 2, 3 in the fly with 50 points in the 100 butterfly. Up next is event number 15, the women's 100-yard freestyle. Lane 3 is Calvin's Kaylee Turner. Lane 4 is Calvin's Jenna Pierce. Lane 5 is Hope's Paige Kuhn. And lane 6 is Calvin's Katie Skolma. Jenna Pierce touching in at 57.73 in lane 4 for Calvin. Up next is Heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope, Maggie Horner. Lane 2 for Calvin, Megan Benjelink. Lane 3 for Hope, Delaney Wesolek. Lane 4 for Calvin, Sydney Sunday. Lane 5 for Hope is Laurel Wozniak. Lane 6 for Calvin, Hannah Brown. Lane 7 for Hope, Maddie Remenschneider. Lane 8 for Calvin, Kara Bolger. And Laurel Wozniak touches in with 52.83 in lane 5. Calvin Sydney Sunday in at 53.46. Delaney Wesolek of Hope at 54.13 in lane 3. Fourth to Megan Benjelink at 55.00. Up next is event number 16, the men's 100-yard freestyle. There are 2 heats. This is heat 1. Lane 1 for Calvin is Jaden Brookins. Lane 2 for Calvin is Henry Fippen. Lane 3 for Hope is Kellen Townsend. Lane 4 for Calvin, Zach Logan. Lane 5 for Hope is Jack Muller. Lane 6 for Calvin, Ben Fippen. Lane 7 for Hope is Jake Peterson. Lane 8 for Calvin, Tater Ring. Zach Logan touching in for that heat with a 49.22 to take lane 4 for Calvin. Ben Fippen for 49 in lane 6. Up next is heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope is Joey Grassman. Lane 1 for Hope is Joey Grassman. Lane 2 for Calvin is Bryce Miner. Lane 3 for Hope is Bishop Carl. Lane 4 for Calvin, Jake Harris. Lane 5 for Hope is Connor East. Lane 6 for Calvin, Hudson DeBoer. Lane 7 for Hope, Benjamin Dubé. And lane 8 for Calvin, Vladimir Mullen. Jake Harris, 56-11. Vlad Mullen, 47-22. Bryce Miner, 47-28. Connor East for fourth for Hope at 48-06. Calvin going 1-2-3 in the men's 100-yard freestyle. Up next, it's event number 17. This is the women's 100-yard backstroke. There are 2 heats. This is Heat 1. Lane 2 for Calvin is Maya Bedford. Lane 3 for Calvin is Kaylin Ogg. Lane 4 for Calvin is Rachel Hytonic. Lane 5 for Calvin, Tori Beagle. Lane 6 for Calvin, Libby Martinson. Tori Beagle touching in at 107.58 there in lane 5. Kaylin Ogg at 114.29. All right, up next is Heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope is Macy Mayer. Lane 2 for Calvin, Maddie McNearney. Lane 3 for Hope is Nora Martin. Lane 4 for Calvin, Claire Seitzma. Lane 5 for Hope, Sarah Kraus. Lane 6 for Calvin, Sadie Norman. Lane 7 for Hope, Ashley Geddes. And lane 8 for Calvin, Lauren Robertson. And Sarah Kraus touches with a 57.84 in lane 5. Claire Seitzman at 59.26. Ashley Geddes for third at 100.30. Sadie Norman for fourth at 102.31. Up next is event number 18, the men's 100-yard backstroke. This is heat 1 of 2. Lane 3 for Calvin, Drew Schmid. Lane 4 for Calvin, Jake Ziggy. Lane 5 for Calvin, Josiah Viss. Lane 6 for Calvin, Henry Fippen. Lane 7 for Calvin, Jonathan Taylor. And Jacob Ziegler touching in at 54.41 in lane 4. That's it for Heat 1. Up next is Heat 2.
Lane 2 for Calvin, Will Toomey. Lane 3 for Hope, Dallas Fisher. Lane 4 for Calvin, Noah Holstag. Lane 5 for Hope, Ben Catton. Lane 6 for Calvin, Tim Hayes. Lane 7 for Calvin, Charlie Platt. And Noah Holstag touches with a 51.24. Tim Hayes touching in for second at 51.67. Ben Catton in for 51.87, and Charlie Platt at 51.89. That's going to do it for our 100s of backstroke. Up next is event number 19. This is the women's 500-yard freestyle. This is Heat 1. Lane 1 for Hope College is Katie Whedon. Lane 2 for Calvin, Isabella Gable. Lane 3 for Hope, Grace Wesley. Lane 4 for Calvin, Kristen Winkle. Lane 5 for Hope, Ashley Swingewood. Lane 6 for Calvin, Megan Pankratz. Lane 7 for Hope, Maggie Monroe. And lane 8 for Calvin, Becca Streelman. Halfway through the race, Ashley Swingewood at 2:34.03 in lane 5. Swinchwood gets the bell at 4:42.74 with 50 yards to go in lane 5 for Hope College. And Swinchwood touches at 5:13.89 in lane 5 for Hope. Taking the women's 500-yard freestyle. Coming in second here in lane 2 is Isabella Gable for Calvin at 5:22.68. Grace Wesley at 5:26.61. Winkle in at 5:29.29 in lane 4. Maggie Monroe touching in at 5:40.00. And Megan Pankratz at 5:40.87. Streelman in at 5:45.70. All right, up next is event number 20, the men's 500-yard freestyle. There is one heat. Lane 1 for Hope is Kenny Pontius. Lane 2 for Calvin, Caleb Tershak. Lane 3 for Hope is Bailey Smith. Lane 4 for Calvin, Josh Seidelman. Lane 5 for Hope is Connor Hallberg. Lane 6 for Calvin, Sam Hoover. Lane 7 for Hope, Alex Boersma. Lane 8 for Calvin is Austin Martinson. .200 yards into the race. Connor Hallberg leading at 1:51.33. Josh Seidelman at 1:52.62. Bailey Smith at 1:54.47. Tershak at 1:55.90. Hoover 1:57.23. Boersma 1:59.22. Pontius 1:59.42. And Martinson 2:01.62. A perfect flying V formation off of Hallberg in lane 5 here. Leading the way for Hope College. 100 yards to go for Connor Hallberg in lane 5, 3:48.09. 100 yards for Bailey Smith, passing Josh Seidelman with 100 yards left to go at 3:53 and 3:53. And Hallberg gets the bell at 4:17.47. Hallberg finishing at 4:46.47. Josh Seidelman with a heroic last 25 to take second there at 4:51.07. Good night. Bailey Smith at 4:51.83. Caleb Tershak at 4:58.17. Hoover under the 5-minute mark at 4:59.30, and Boersma at 4:59.61. That's going to do it for event number 20, the men's 500-yard freestyle. Up next is event number Up next, we have a break before event number 24, the men's 100-yard breaststroke. We have a full 15-minute break. We will resume at 6:45.
5-minute warning to the start of the relays. 5-minute warning to the start of the relays. Excuse me, the breaststroke.
2-minute warning. 2-minute warning to the beginning of event number 23, the women's 100-yard breaststroke. 2-minute warning. Let's begin to clear the competition pool. All right, as soon as our officials are in place, we will resume with event number 23, the women's 100-yard breaststroke. Here we go, event number 23, the women's 100 breaststroke. This is heat 1. Lane 4 for Calvin, Leah Iverson. Lane 5 for Calvin, Natalie Vroon. Uh, 1:15:41 for Leah Iverson, lane 4. Natalie Vroon touching in at 1:17. Oh, sorry about that. 1:17:36 in lane 5. Up next is heat 2. Lane 1 for Hope College, Jessica Estabrook. Lane 2 for Calvin, Sophia Korfmacher. Lane 3 for Hope, Aubrey East. Lane 4 for Calvin, Haley Thier. Lane 5 for Hope, Maddie Remenschneider. Lane 6 for Calvin, Elise Radowski. Lane 7 for Hope is Alyssa Kirkman. And lane 8 for Calvin, Abigail Mers. Oh, 107.18 for Haley Thier in lane 4. Elise Radowski at 109.84 in lane 6. Remenschneider at 110.72 in lane 5. Up next is the men's 100-yard breaststroke, event number 24. There are 2 heats. Heat 1. Up next is Heat 2 for event number 24, the men's 100-yard breaststroke. Lane 1 for Hope College, Riley LeGrand. Lane 2 for Calvin, Antonio Crudeli. Lane 3 for Hope is Ted Lockett. Lane 4 for Calvin is Caleb Gemin. Lane 5 for Hope, Christian Donatus. Lane 7 for Hope, Jack Muller. Lane 8 for Calvin, Alex Jackson. And Caleb Gemin, 58.25, touching for Calvin in lane 4. Christian Donatus for second there at 59.98. Ted Lockett at 100.25. And Anthony Crudeli at 100.60. Up next is event number 25, the final event for the evening, the women's 400-yard freestyle relay. There is one heat. All right, swimming in lane 1 is the Calvin C relay of Hansel, Beagle, Turner, and Ogg. Lane 3 is the Hope B relay of Geddes, Swingewood, Wesley, and Martin. Lane 4 is the Calvin A relay of Gable, Benjelink, Winkle, and Brown. Lane 5, the Hope A relay of Turner, Weselek, Ryle, and Wozniak. Lane 6, the Calvin B relay of Norman, Bolger, Seitzma, and Fisher. Lane 7, the Hope C relay of Tessin, Horner, Hobbs, and Whedon. Lane 8 for Calvin is the D relay of Hytonic, Martinson, Steen, and Streelman. And Hope wins with a 3:34.97 in lane 5. Calvin touching at 3:40.98 in lane 4. Calvin's B relay touching in at 3:44.70. That's going to do it for event number 25 as these last swimmers finish. All right, our final race for the evening, event number 26, the men's 400-yard freestyle relay. Lane 1 for Hope, the D relay of Nissen, Grassman, Smith, and Gillen-Gerton. Lane 2, the Calvin C relay of Kulaga, Cami, Logan, and Hoover. Lane 3, the Hope B relay of Osgood, Ewell, East, and Pontius. Lane 4, the Calvin A relay of Harris, Mullen, Campbell, and Miner. Lane 5, the Hope A relay of Kalkman, Catton, Boersma, and Hallberg. Lane 6, the Calvin B relay of Seidelman, Bajwa, DeBoer, and Martinson. Lane 7, the Hope C relay of Cummins, Dubé, Peel, and Carl. Lane 8, the Calvin D relay of Meyer, Van Ast, Wayne, and Pippin. Jake Harris with a slight lead in lane 4, 45.93. Hope's A relay in the water at 47.6. Calvin's B relay in the water at 47.9. That's Vladimir Mullen for Calvin in lane 4. That's Ben Catton for Hope in lane 5. Calvin in the lead at 1:32.18 at the halfway mark. Swimming in lane 4, there is Corey Campbell against Alex Boersma of Hope in lane 5. Lane 6, that's Hudson DeBoer for Calvin in the B relay, creeping up on Hope's A. Bryce Miner anchoring for Calvin in the water at 2:19.50. And Calvin coming into the finish line at 4:05.88. Finishing out the men's 400 freestyle relay. Hope's A relay touching in at 3:09.12. Calvin's B relay touching at 3:11.11.
That's going to do it for our swimming competition this evening. We have 2 more rounds of diving, and then we'll get the scores in the computer for our final numbers.